Computer. Hey, greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk about a really important topic, the strengths perspective. I have a really special guest today. This is Dr. Crystal McLeod. She's a classmate of mine from our doctoral program at USC, but it's not the real USC, I've been told. I'm gonna let Crystal tell you a little bit about herself and her background, and then we're gonna jump in and have a dialogue about why the strengths perspective.
Yeah, it's so great. Thank you so much for just allowing me to come on and be a part of this. And just thank you for the work that you're actually doing in this field because it's really important. And so, as Grace said, Dr. Crystal McLeod, originally from South Carolina, by the way, attended a class with Gray at the University of Southern California, SoCal, but received my master's of social work at the University of South Carolina and my bachelor's of social work at the University of South Carolina. So as you can see, social work was near and dear since I was a young lady. And actually, I figured this out at about 14 years old. But thought I wanted to be a nurse because I wanted to make more money. Got in my first semester of nursing courses and it was a mess. So I've been around the block, 14 years of military service in the mental health space, working substance use, domestic violence, family violence, child abuse and neglect was my first job out of graduate school, actually. So now currently in private practice, Crystal McLeod and Associates in private practice in Texas, Florida, and North Carolina. Also do some consulting on the side in spaces of in small organizations that are looking to bring wellness programs into the organizations, because as we know, mental health is like the big thing now. And corporations are looking to really bring in more mental wellness programs into their organization. So I do a little bit on the side there as well, but primarily I am in private practice right now. Yeah.
So we're going to have this discussion about strengths perspectives, and I'm going to, for the listeners, I'm going to set the stage a little bit. I recently came across a research article, and unfortunately, I do not have the name of the researcher on the top of my head, but he said something really interesting. He talks about how clinicians are so quick to throw clients under the bus. When clients are not doing well with a treatment plan or not doing well with continuing treatment or being consistent, this researcher says clinicians just throw that client under the bus. And rather than take a risk and look at themselves, is there something that they're doing or not doing to truly engage that client and really strengthen that relationship? When we are quick to throw a client under the bus, right? And for those of you listening, you've worked hopefully in enough, you've had enough work experience, you possibly have heard other people at settings say, oh, that client's crazy, or that client's manipulative, or that client is, they're just, they're a frequent flyer. When you hear those kind of terms, I know, Crystal knows, and I want you, the listener, to know that that is not strength-based. We cannot be truly strength-based if we think clients are manipulative, or that clients are frequent flyers, or that clients are liars. We have to think about not throwing them under the bus. That cannot be strength-based. So why is strength-based practice so critical, Crystal?
So let's talk. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, let's take ourselves, for example, when we talk about strength-based. Anytime we're doing something, we're doing it from a place of familiarity, a place of knowledge, a place of comfort, right? And so as therapists, what we always have to remember is that a lot of times when clients come into our office, okay, they are in a place of comfort, right? What they're familiar with, whether it be family, community, environment. And as it is our job to actually tap into what a client is already good at, right? To help them meet their goals. So let's even talk really quickly, make sure we understand what actually strength-based approaches is. It actually focuses on the individual strengths. So not just the individual strengths though, it talks about personal growth, it talks about community, network, all those different types of things that the person may be utilizing to actually move around or survive day to day. It does not focus on someone's deficits. That is
Absolutely.
not the focus of strength-based work, not to focus on weaknesses. What we want to do is use the strengths, the things that the clients are good at, to actually increase and better those things that they see as deficits in their life. So what you're doing from a strength-based perspective is that you're working with an individual to promote their overall well-being based on the things that they're actually pretty good at, the networks that they currently have, the community connections they currently have, especially when we're in a micro or a macro level space.
And I think that is a great definition. And I
Mhm,
would give an example. Um,
mhm,
I've been in foster homes where the foster parent will say to me, this kid is a thief.
mhm,
And in my mind, I'm thinking about, you can't take them to Walmart because they're loading their pockets up. And
mhm,
they'll
mhm,
go, no, they're
mhm,
sneaking food down to their room. And I went,
mhm,
oh, this kid's a survivor, not a thief,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Having
Yeah,
to come from such a neglectful environment where maybe that kid had to,
yeah.
be resourceful to find food to feed his little brother or her little sister, that
Mhm.
doesn't automatically make them a thief. So that perspective, it's that framework or that lens in how we see things. So
Absolutely.
if we see clients as liars, not as survivors or thrivers, then we
Mhm.
can't really operate from a client-centered, strength-based perspective.
Absolutely. And so that's a great example you gave. So as a therapist, I would automatically be thinking, okay, this person is actually a survivor. So this person has skills to push through things that are not comfortable.
Mm.
So how can I use that in our treatment planning or our interventions with this client? Dead on. That's a great one.
I like that way. I like that language about pushing through.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, I know when I was early on in school and I was learning about the strengths perspective, and they would give this example in class. Well, the client's in session, so
Mm-hmm.
that in itself is a strength. And
Mm-hmm.
I always saw that, but it
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel very genuine to say to a client, well, Crystal, at least you're here today. You got that going for
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't feel genuine enough to
Mm-hmm.
me. So for me, being strength based has been more of a lifelong journey of a clinician of how to truly embrace it and practice it.
Absolutely.
It's easy to talk about, but to truly live it, very, very different, challenging.
Absolutely. And so let's see, when you go even a little further than that, let's think about this. I always say, what always think when we think about strength base, always think about what is it that you think about you. Okay, think about you. What areas do you know are you strong in? Constantly think about that. If somebody pulled you out of your comfort zone based on familiarity, what would that feel like for you? Think about your clients in the same way, right? So let's use their familiarity, right? And build up on the treatment plan or the intervention or whatever it is we're trying, whatever direction we're trying to push them in.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that listening to that pops into my head is that for us to be strength based, it
Mhm,
can't just be with the client. It's
mhm,
also has to be within the team or the agency or the
mhm,
department that we're in,
mhm, mhm.
and to be able to see it from the micro to the meso to even maybe the macro level and then back down, and to realize the client is pushed through. I just love that language so much.
Mhm,
The client
mhm.
is pushed through, so what do we do to honor that fact that they pushed through? It's
Absolutely.
more than just showing up for therapy.
Absolutely. Because once we start telling the client what they have done has not been it or the right way, we lose them, right? So how we speak to clients, even though we don't want, so let's use your example, even though we don't want this child to be hoarding, right? When we say to them, hoarding is wrong or taking food and hiding it is wrong, that continues to perpetuate what they already probably are thinking about themselves, right? So what we want to do is, how do we tell a client or how do we talk to a child about what hoarding, hey, so I noticed that, you're pretty good at, hiding things. I noticed that you're pretty good at, seeing things that you may like and seeing things that you may want, or how can we use what that client has done and turn it into something positive, but also helping them understand that, hey, you don't even have to hide food here in this house, because guess what? The pantry's wide open. If you want to eat, you're welcome to go in there. right? So how do we take that as take that and turn it in to something positive? When we start telling people who are really struggling and who are in this survival mode that what they've been doing to survive is wrong, we lose them. We
Yeah,
lose them.
because then we're problem focused at that point.
Yes, exactly. Love it. Great. We're problem focused, so we lose them.
So to the listener, I had shared with Crystal, I had a really great case example that I wanted to share, and I think this is a great place to share this. So I had been contracted by Children's Division in Missouri to do individual therapy with a boy. He was about 14. He was in a foster home. This is about his 8th foster home. I'm probably his 3rd or 4th therapist. And so we had met, not real consistently during the summer, because he had been working and he had gone to camp and, all, things a little 14-year-old should be doing. So in August, we were meeting and I said, hey, with the new school year coming up, let's set some goals. And he goes, oh, I've got a goal. And I'm like, that's awesome. What do you want to do? He goes, I don't want to be suspended one time this year. And I went, whoa, that's a big goal. Now, this kid barely made a week the previous school year of not being suspended. He was suspended every week. So I didn't say, well, that goal is unattainable, or that. I just said, oh, that's a big goal. So am I setting him up for failure? And the answer is no. I don't want to point out that the previous year he was nothing but, a suspension waiting to occur. So a week or two went by. We had the start of school. We had Labor Day, and I saw him after a couple of weeks. He had his head down, and his body language was, his nonverbals was, I'm not right, I'm not good. And I said, hey, what's going on? And he goes, oh man, I got suspended last week for 3 days. And he's thinking about his goal of not being suspended the whole year. And I looked at him and I said, 3 days. Now he's ready for me to say, why were you suspended? What did you do? Right? Because that's what everybody has done in his life.
Saying, yep.
What I said was this. I looked at him and I said, so you went to school 2 whole days last week? And immediately his head came up really slow. His eye contact was questionable. And he goes, yeah, I went to school 2 days. And I go, that's a pretty good start, man. That's a pretty good start. And he goes, yeah, now his head's all the way up. Because I've never still asked him, what did you do? Why were you suspended? I really don't care about that stuff. And I figure he'll tell me when he's ready to tell me. So he goes, man, next week, I'm going to go to school 4 days, the whole week. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy talk. How about we just do 3? Let's just do 3. Yeah. So here I am giving him permission to be suspended, that it's really okay. It's really okay. And his head was up because I wasn't hammering on what he did wrong. I was looking at what he had done well. And that was, he made it to school 2 whole days that week.
I love it. And not only did you gave him permission to make a mistake.
Yeah.
You gave him permission to actually set goals, because let's just be realistic. This child has been being suspended his entire school year the year before, right? Not being suspended at all this previous year. That's a big deal, right? So when he came to you and said, yeah, I wasn't able to do it. Okay. So how next week, like you said, we go 3 days, right? And then we even go further. What do you think you did right those first 2 days to keep
right? Oh yeah. What did you do right those first 2 days?
Yes. You know what I'm saying? What did you do right? What worked? Right? We got to build off of those things that's what motivates clients, when you use exactly what they already have inside of them to help them be successful.
Absolutely.
That's it.
I think to be truly strength-based, we have to be willing to let go that we are the expert. We are not the expert.
Say it again.
Whether it's a 14-year-old or a 34-year-old, I'm not an expert on their lens, their worldview, their life, their decision making. And I will tell you a secret. My kids would even tell you I'm not an expert of them. Quite frankly, I'm not an expert of anything. But when I meet clinicians that sit in that place, that they see themselves as the expert, it's very difficult to be strength-based at that point.
So, you know, for clinicians that may be struggling with trying to see themselves as the experts, right? I would ask you to do some self-reflection in that space. Because would you want someone to say that you're the expert about their life? About your life? Would you want someone to come and tell you, I know you better than you know yourself? Right? So we really have to practice, that look in the mirror. Hey, I tell people all the time, I'm just a consultant, right? My job is to kind of sit in this session with you and come up with different strategies and things that may or may not work, right? And we figure it out from there. I'm just a consultant, right? But I do sometimes think because we are on this side of the room or the chair or the computer or we're being sought out as the professional, we tend to think that we can think that, hey, we know all of these things, but in actuality, I don't know any more about my client than what they bring into that room with me. My client will always be the expert on their life. I am just giving them some tools to improve in the areas that they feel they want to improve in.
Absolutely.
That's it. And
Absolutely.
that's how I think about it.
And I think when, if whether it be like MSW graduate students or BSW students, when they end up in agencies where they say that they are strength-based, but then the agency is struggling, what I would say to them is that a couple things. Number one, strength-based is, like I said, it's harder to do than it is to talk about it. Number two, I think when we fall prey to trauma at a meso and macro level and our agencies are trauma-based, I think it's easy to walk the walk and not talk the talk. And then before you realize it, you are having conversations with staff about clients being manipulative and being in lying and they're out to get something. Well, more power to them. They should get as much as they can get. What's the harm of that?
So you said something very interesting. You talked about when you work at a macro level or work for agencies that are, you said, trauma based, right? And I'm gonna take
trauma organized.
Trauma organized, yeah.
Like the organization has suffered vicarious trauma.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And also, so you mean not the clients, you mean the people that work there?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. Yes. That's definitely a different ballgame. So how do you change that perspective, right? How do you, it's almost like a prison system, right? When you're dealing with COs who are just so used to the drama, right? The trauma, survival, safety. Remember, organizations that are focused on safety of a client, can sometimes tend to be a little bit red tape-ish. Right. And then that causes even more harm to the agency and workers as a whole. Right. And so there's a lot of things you may not be able to do or things that you may be able to do based on that. Right. Or because we're constantly on guard. Right. That something is going to happen or someone's made us feel that way. Right. Or we have a leader in the organization that is constantly pinging about everything and not allowing the folks that work in the organization autonomy. Right? Yeah, that's definitely stressful for an organization. Definitely.
Sandra Bloom writes about that in a book called Destroying Sanctuary. There's a little section in the book, and for the listeners, Sandra Bloom is a psychiatrist out of Philadelphia. She's a trauma expert, but at the macro and meso level, not at the individual level like Bessel van der Kolk or Bruce Perry would be. And she writes in Destroying Sanctuary this little segment about how when she was in practice, residential treatment, there was an adolescent that kept running away. And they were so focused on her safety that they forgot to treat her like a human being. So when they would get her back from one of her runs, they would put all of these rules around her, her ability to function. They would strip her room of her dresser and her bed frame and anything in there that could harm herself. And before they realized it, they were treating her more like a non-human than a hurt, 14-year-old young lady.
Yeah.
And you're right. It was that overall focus of her safety. We're failing her safety. So we're going to just pull away everything that makes her uniquely her. And at that point, you're not strength-based, you're not trauma-informed, you're not client-centered, and you've lost your way. And agencies do that. And I think sometimes they have lost their way. This is just my opinion, and they don't know that they have lost their way.
Absolutely. Because there's no because we got to have balance, right? We got to have balance. We do. That's why we have safety officers or safety people in organizations. That's why we have HRs. That's why we have, clinicians. We got to make sure we're being balanced. Okay. So when we come together as the group, okay, how do we help this young lady be successful? The safety person chimes in. Here are some things we need to do. Well, the clinician might say, well, let's consider this versus this, but I understand this. So that's why we have to have these multidisciplinary folks in a room. That's why we have case management, right? Because sometimes organizations, especially someone leading an organization or in a certain position, sometimes we can forget. We can forget about the client because we're trying to lead an organization. We're focused on operations so much that we cannot be client-centered because operations is more important. So that's a great point. We have to always stay on our toes and have accountability across the board. Because at the end of the day, when all fails, we are here to support a client. At the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, are we supporting this client appropriately? Is this client getting what they need? If they're not getting what they need, why aren't they getting what they need?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's about the client. And it isn't about my personal feelings. I can't let my personal feelings get in the way. And I would say you threw out a challenge about 10 minutes ago about self-awareness. I would say to the listeners, let's take that one step further. If you hear a colleague, a coworker, a supervisor who has come off that path of being strength-based, I think you have a responsibility to just not only be self-aware of your own, but to ask them, hey, I've noticed you've left the path. You're out here four-wheeling, you've left the path. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I would hope that all staff, whether it be interns or LCSWs with years of experience, have that ability, that self-awareness to take a step back and then be able to ask our colleagues, hey, Gray, you seem like you're off your A game today. Yeah, Crystal, I am off my A game. I really appreciate you noticing that and bringing that to my attention. Because if you notice it, I know 100% the clients have noticed it.
Absolutely.
And what does that do to the structure? That's called the parallel process.
Absolutely. Having a time and calling the time out. They do it in the surgery rooms all the time. It's life or death sometimes, right? The surgeon number 2 or the nurse or the paraprofessional is called, whoa, this doesn't seem right. Let's have a quick time out. Let's have a huddle. Let's see what's going on. Whoa, this thing's off. Right? We do it all the time in the medical profession. So how can we bring some of that stuff in our field as well? We can do some of those same things. Like you said, calling Gray out. Whoa, I noticed this week you've been having a rough week. Let's have a time out here. Let's take a chat. Let's take a walk around the building. Let's go to lunch because we need to make sure that you're okay. So I love that aspect.
Because at the end of the day, it still boils back down to the clients.
It does. It will always. That's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, when we as an organization is not functioning efficiently, it will trickle down. It always does. There's no way around it. There's no way around
it. And I would say this as we get ready to wrap up, for the listener, strength-based, in my opinion, is you can't, as I said before, you can't be client-centered. You can't be solution focused. You have a hard time using motivational interviewing. You have a hard time being, person-centered if you're not strength-based. All of these frameworks are interconnected with each other. I can't leave one out and say, we are client-centered, because if we're not strength-based, we're not really client-centered. And one time I had a student when I was an adjunct, and she wrote in her paper, we do she wrote, we do DBT at my agency, but the clients aren't there very long. So we never get to the mindfulness. So I wrote back and I said, then you're really not doing DBT. You can't say you're doing something and then leave out a whole piece, because the whole model is connected. So strength-based isn't just this perspective, it is this framework, and all these other things are connected, and you can't do one without the other.
And I'll go a step further here. And this is for, those that may be watching this. I know we hear a lot about cultural competence, but I'm gonna go even a little further when it comes to strength-based. Cultural responsiveness is strength-based. Okay. You have to know a person that you're working with. You have to know their cultural background, their customs, their courtesies, their values, their belief systems. You know what I mean? I find myself all the time. I'm fortunate that I get to work with so many different backgrounds of people, but sometimes I have to go do my research. Right? Well, hey, I'm not familiar with this culture or this practice. Let me go do my research because I don't want to cause more harm to somebody in my client, in my relationship with them. So it's not only enough to be culturally competent, it's important to be culturally responsive as well. How are you responding to the client? You have to respond to the client based off of what their values and belief systems are. And that's how we remain strength-based, because guess what?
Right.
Their values and beliefs are probably going to be their strengths, even though we may not agree. Right? And that's not our place to say we don't agree, but we still have to start where they are.
And for us as clinicians, we have to have that cultural humility to know that there's a lot we don't know.
Absolutely.
And to own that.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that means you got to set your notebook down and look at the client and just say, tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, all day. I am sitting here. I've never heard of that. Can you tell me that? What's normal? Especially when I get clients, who are from populations that I've never worked with. For example, I had a Hmong, a young lady from, she was Hmong. No idea what that was. I told her up front, I have no idea. Can you educate me? Right? And then after our session, guess what I did? Started Googling my own stuff. Let me find out more about this. Because what I think interventions may be in the Hmong community, that may be a problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So strengths-based, where do I start? Right? So being
with what they're good at. With
yes. What are they good at? Start where they are. Yeah.
If a client can't make eye contact with you, it isn't that they're being disrespectful. Their strength may just be, their own trust issues. They've got to stay downward because that's how they keep themselves safe personally.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, that's a strength.
That's a good one, Greg. I'll tell you one more thing. I know we gotta go. I get excited about this stuff. So I have a young lady who never likes to be on video during therapy. But what we came to the agreement with is, at least when you come on camera, I need to see you for the first minute or 2 minutes. And a part of that is to make sure, she's safe. There's no marks, a safety check. Just give me 2 minutes at the beginning of the session and you can go off camera. So how can we negotiate with clients who are not comfortable, like you said, looking you in your eye, or who may not feel comfortable coming on camera, talking about personal things? All right, she's here. That's a strength. He's here. That's a strength. Can you give me 1 minute to just look at you and see how you're doing? And then you can go off camera and we can have our session. There you go.
So I have a silly story. So when I was a therapist at a residential center, I had this young boy, and he was 14 years old, African-American. He was not there by choice. He was in state custody, had been taken into state custody. And me being, a person without color, he couldn't feel like he could connect to me. And I was really okay with that. And he came in, he said, I'm not doing therapy. I don't need therapy. And I said, no big deal. But let me ask this. What do you think therapy is? Because I don't want to accidentally do it. So he told me what therapy was. And I said, all right, I'll never do it. So he would come in and he would always sit in a chair and he would stare at the ceiling. And then I would just do a check-in quick. Are you safe? He would agree to do that. And then I would just say, hey, you're in here, do whatever you need. The granola bars are over here. He would just stare at the ceiling. So about this, I don't know, 6th session in, he comes in, he assumes his position, he's looking at the ceiling. And so I get up and I stand on a chair and I start pushing on the ceiling tiles, and the ceiling tile dust is coming down. It's getting in his hair. It's getting in my hair. And I look down and he's looking at me. It's the first time he's ever looked at me. And he goes, what are you doing? And I go, well, every week you stare at my ceiling. I just thought I needed to check it out, make sure it was okay. And he laughed. He goes, dude, you're not right. And I said, I know. From that point, right, our relationship began to develop, because it wasn't about seeing him as being disrespectful. It was about giving him that space and that time that he needed, and to let him know that I'm just a human as well. I look different than him. I'm not 14. I can't, I was once upon a time, but I was never a black young man. And the end of the day, we were able to build on that, but it was through the strengths perspective, what he was comfortable being able to do. And then me being willing to be a little bit silly. So
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. We got to do what we have to do to establish rapport either way. Rapport sometimes happen and it doesn't, but it sounds like in this case it did happen. So I like that.
a second great story about this young man. I had started a scout program at the residential, and we would go to scout camp. And we're at scout camp, and one of the other kids comes up to me and says, John, that's not his name. John's really sick. And I said, oh, he is? So I go down, and this is the same kid. I go, John, what's going on? He goes, oh man, my stomach's so upset. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. Have you tried to go to the bathroom? And John goes, go to the bathroom? I'm not going in that latrine. A spider will crawl up my rear end. And I was like, oh, John, by the time you go, you're going to kill every spider for, a half mile. And he laughed. And so, not to make a big deal, no power struggle worth having, I loaded up all the boys and I said, we're going for a soda run into the city. And we left scout camp and we drove to a gas station that had flush toilets. And I bought everybody around to sodas. I didn't make a big deal about everybody go to the toilet. John ran up to the toilet and used a flush toilet. You just build on what he's good at.
You got to.
I'm not sitting in that latrine, and I just didn't make a big deal of it. It's time for the soda run. Let's go get an ice cream run, and we'll get it figured out. Same kid.
Yeah, super cool. I love it.
All right. Hey, thank you so much, Dr. Crystal McLeod. You are an inspiration, and your energy is it's it's hard to deny. You have such great energy.
I mean, I try. What we do is so important, and I still love this work, and it's been 15 years. It's not always, great days, but I still love this work. And so anytime I can come and help you guys, just let me know.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hold on here. I'm going to log out of the recording piece.